So I did a fair amount of research on you, Chris, but was it always baseball?
Yes, always. I
Yeah.
mean, just obviously as a young athlete, played different sports and through high school and even in college was able to play basketball a little bit. But no, baseball's been my passion as far as sports goes and been able to turn it into a career and feel very fortunate for what I do. So.
Normally, the athletes I talk to go to college to play one sport. You went to college to play two. Were you being dual recruited, or did you just kind of tack on basketball once you got there?
So no, no one wanted me for both. Essentially, I was a baseball recruit a lot of places, and I ended up going to play baseball only. And I missed basketball. I felt like it was something that was missing, and I enjoyed being part of that team and the athleticism that it brought, and just practices and things like that. So I ended up leaving the school I originally signed for out of high school for baseball, and ended up going to a smaller school that afforded me the opportunity to do both, and you know didn't have a whole lot of playing time as a basketball player, but again, I really enjoyed the chance to do both and what that meant to me. I just had a great experience doing that.
So when did you transfer?
It
Or
would have
did you
been
get on
after my
campus with the first
part.
school? Did you get on campus with the first school, or
Oh
did
yeah, yeah.
you?
Played my freshman year of baseball, and then was home that summer and played basketball a lot, and was playing summer baseball, summer basketball, and just missed it and felt as if okay, hey, this is something I want to try to pursue. Um, and I did talk to a few other people, other schools about just baseball again, but then I was like, no, the baseball at the school I ended up going to, which was Eastern University, it was a very good NAIA program when I first went there, and now it's transitioned to NCAA Division III. Um, but we had a lot of talented kids that were, like-minded and wanted to get better and win, and so it was a good place for me to spend 3 years and get a chance, like I said, to do both.
I mean, you played two sports, you were an All-American pitcher, and then you were inducted into the Hall of Honor. What
Yeah, that
was
was cool.
that's incredible. Can you kind of talk to me about your trajectory through Eastern, how they helped kind of establish you as a pitcher, but also for your career?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the All American thing, honestly, was I had good numbers. I threw strikes. I didn't throw super hard. I was probably a better position player than I was a pitcher, but it just ended up where I was able to collect some wins and pitch some bulk innings for us, and we had a good team. So again, that's kind of where that stemmed from. Proud of it, and they just were able to do a good job, I feel like, developing a guy that didn't have big velocity into a guy that could, work both sides of the plate. I learned how to utilize a two-seamer and four-seamer, so I was sinking the ball a lot for a lot of ground ball outs. Wasn't a big strikeout guy or anything like that. I mean, the hardest part of doing both was probably, you know, I always felt like if I was doing bullpens, I needed to be taking ground balls or swinging the bat in the cage. Or if I was taking ground balls and swinging the bat in the cage, I always feel like need to be working on my mechanics or my changeup or something. So that pull of being a two-way dual position guy was had its challenges itself. That sometimes I had to stick around for some extra work to take some ground balls and things like that, which I was always open to do and liked working, so that was fine. Um, I remember I was scouting in the Mid Atlantic, whatever year that would have been, 2011 or 12. Um, Sorry, did I lose you?
No,
Okay,
still here.
something came up on my computer. Sorry. Um, I remember I was scouting and I was driving through rural parts of Virginia going to see a high school game. And I see a phone call come in from a number I didn't recognize. So I kind of pulled off in a gas station or something like that, took the call. And it was the then athletic director at Eastern letting me know that I was going to be put into the Hall of Honor there, which was super cool. And I knew that no one in baseball had been put in yet. And I thought of all my teammates and coaches and everybody that was part of that, and I thought it was really cool moment, and I was very appreciative of that honor. And my daughter, got a chance to go and be there when I was inducted, and a lot of my family were there and friends, so it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, you were the first baseball player inducted into the Hall of Honor.
Yeah.
What did that tell you about your longevity around the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, I think I always was mindful of, you know, making good decisions, treating people the right way. Obviously, student athlete, student comes first, but also, you know, be a great ambassador for Eastern when we were on the road, or um, when I became a college coach, I was doing things to try to help their program along, whether it was donate a tarp that we were, finished using at Westchester because they didn't have one, and just try. I always tried to be, a good quality person first and foremost, while there, and then having left, the same mindset. So, um, yeah, that's kind of the way I approached it. And there were some great people there, my time there, and it was it was pretty fun experience.
Yeah, you went from playing two sports in college to playing professional baseball. I mean, that was kind of the early to mid 90s. What did pro baseball look like at that point?
It's really interesting because I was lucky enough to go, and there were some scouts that were around my senior year of college, and but no one was going to consider me in the MLB draft. I had played in some good summer collegiate leagues and done some different things, to just keep getting better. But I was not that kind of MLB level draft prospect. However, we had these independent leagues start to pop up, and there were two. There was the Northern League and the Frontier League, and I decided, I don't know, a couple weeks after graduation or whatever, that I was going to drive down to Chillicothe, Ohio, and try out for this Frontier League. So there are about 250, 240, 250 players from all across the country. Got to meet guys that played, Division One level, Division Two, Division Three, whatever. And after 3 or 4 days, they had a draft. And the night before the draft, I remember hanging out with some of the guys I got to meet there, and we were talking, and there were some officials from some of the different teams were there, and a couple had come over to me and said that I was on their list. So I had an idea that I was going to be drafted into the Frontier League at some point, which was cool. Um, so happened that team out of Ashland, Kentucky, selected me. Jody Hamilton, who was a Yankees farmhand, he was the manager, and I remember talking to him at one of our first practices, like, what did you see him? And he's like, I just like the way you play, the intensity, the hustle, little things, like not so much the tools and skills, which they were just okay. I was a solid contact hitting, left-hand hitting infielder. I wasn't anything like, power dropping bombs at the tryouts or anything like that. Believe me, I didn't run a 6'5", believe me. Um, but I did some things pretty well. And I think he saw like passion to play the game and somebody that he wanted to be a utility type infielder. And that's what I did. I bounced around the infield a little bit, and it was a great experience. And it led, ironically enough, Jody happened to be good friends with the head baseball coach at Eastern Kentucky University, and it led to a grad assistantship in their athletic department. When it all was said and done, he's like, I think you'd make a good coach someday, or, might be something you want to pursue. If you do, let me know. And I remember being back home in Philly towards the end of that summer, reaching out to him and saying, yeah, you know what? I don't have anything else to do right now. I don't know what I want to do yet. So I knew I wanted to work and be in baseball at some point. So I was able to get a grad assistantship through time in the Frontier League through a great contact in Jody Hamilton.
I mean, looking at your schooling, I would say that a Bachelor of Science in Phys Ed and then a Master's in Sport Administration would, with a baseball background, would put you pretty prime in scouting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I first broke into scouting, this is funny because I feel like when I first broke into scouting, college coaches were looked at as, college guy, doesn't really, isn't really going to be able to make an impact in player development, or, we have to train and teach a lot. And today I look at some of the college guys that are becoming big league managers and hitting coordinators and things like that. And it's come full circle to where the college guys have a little bit more, I'd say, respect from the pro game and the pro people, which is cool. But it wasn't necessarily like that when I first started out. Let's just say that.
Let's take a step back to those years spent in the Frontier League. When you're in a tryout, coming from an NAIA school with D2, D1 players, what is, I mean, is there a need in your mind to prove yourself?
I mean, I didn't look at the guy next to me and care where he played or what accolades he may have had or what he hit as a senior in the Ohio Valley Conference or what that stuff that never played into my mind. It was about me showing what I can do to the best of my ability each day, each station, each drill, hustle, get more reps, show I want extra work, show I could be a great teammate, all those different things that I knew I could bring value to, an independent league team that way. And yeah, I mean, when you saw an outfielder cut a ball loose and it's mid 90s, high 90s from right field, I pretty much knew that guy played in the ACC. Well, it was actually at Miami at that time, but whatever conference they were in, I was like, yeah, okay, that guy played pretty high level college baseball, clearly, But again, I didn't worry about that, and people didn't worry about that with me. They were like, man, you got really good hands, or you got really good feet, or it wasn't like, oh, you played NAIA in Division III at Eastern. Like, it wasn't about that. We were all just there wanting an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sports like baseball that are so individualized give you a pretty good sense of how good you actually are, right? Like you have personalized stats that you can legitimately compare to other people. Does that
For
help
sure.
or hurt your mental health as you're competing for spots?
I think if you dwell too much on smaller samples, it can hurt. I think we tend to overreact to, you know, a rough stretch of a couple weeks where you might be 1 for 20 or something like that, or 1 for 8, and that could kill your overall batting average or OPS, of course. But you know, that doesn't mean you forgot how to hit, um, or you've lost your approach in the box. It just might. You may have hit four balls hard right at people. That's the nature of this game, right? So and I've preached that to my daughter forever, and it's not about just results. It's about your process and the quality of your at bats and helping the team win any way you can. It could be just by getting a great read on a ball in the dirt that day. You may have gone 0 for 4, but you reached on a fielder's choice one time in a close game. Well, if you have an outstanding read on a ball in dirt, or you steal a base and score a run, that's as big as going 2 for 4 that day, if you ask me. And doesn't show up that way in your stats, maybe, but yeah, I think for me the mental side of things was always about confidence and preparedness. And I always felt as an athlete and then as a coach, and even to some extent, even now scouting, like I wanted to outwork and out prepare anybody and everybody around me. And as a coach, I wanted to make sure I felt like it wasn't quantifiable. I couldn't calculate if we were working harder than school X, Y, or Z. But my 30 guys in the program, or my 30 players, you know, felt like we outworked and outprepared that team we were getting ready to play tomorrow. And that carries a lot of positive weight into your play, I feel. So
So your perspective is kind of that it all does come out in the wash, that you can overcompensate for deficiencies, we'll call them.
I think so. And I just think back to the earlier point, I think some people tend to over emphasize like small samples, or get overly critical of themselves or down on themselves. And equally, if you're never as good as that 4 for 4 day, right? Like, you know, it's about trying to stay even keel and riding out some of the ups and downs, because there's this game. I mean, you've seen the Derek Jeter quotes or everybody. There's always quotes. This game can kick your butt if you let it, right? And you have to understand the highs and lows and fight through those. So
What was the process of going from a professional baseball player to a coach like? First at the assistant level and then getting your first head coaching job.
yeah, so I think as a, I mean, it was easy for me. I was ready when I got out of the Frontier League. I was like, okay, look, maybe I'll still play in some summer semi-pro men's leagues and things like that because I love playing the game. But I want to make this a career somehow. And so to make it a career, it wasn't going to be through playing. It was going to be through other avenues. Um, Full-time coaching jobs were not easy to get in the mid 90s. It was very, very difficult, even with a little bit of, Frontier League playing time and master's degree and whatnot. It was a challenge. And I remember reaching out to a lot of the coaches that recruited me. When I finished up my master's degree, I reached out to a lot of the coaches that had recruited me in the Philadelphia area, Division I schools and stuff. And a few got back to me, and I was able to have lunch with the head coach at Drexel, Don Maines, and it was awesome. We just like immediately clicked. Similar approach to the game, mindset, passion, fire. Like, can tell he was an overachiever as a player. That kind of like, and I feel like I tried to be that too. Um, and we just hit it off really well. He offered me a job on the spot. It was maybe a volunteer assistant my first year, but he let me coach. I handled the infielders. I helped him with the hitters. He was never over my shoulder in drills. He was letting me teach the way I liked to teach footwork and hands and, release and arm things with infielders. If there was a thing that he thought I could do better, we talk about it in the office, of course, but, really, really was a great mentor to my coaching career and even today to my, in my scouting. Like I still talk occasionally with Coach Maines. I wish I talked more often with him, but I think it was a great fit for me, and it worked out to be an amazing 5 years I spent there with him at Drexel. And you talk about you know when people go through not internships, but like apprenticeships and things. It was the best apprenticeship, internship, whatever you want to call it, for to become a head coach. Working with him, with Darren Munns, who is a head coach in college now. Roy Hallenbeck was another guy I worked with on staff there at Drexel that is a successful, longtime successful high school baseball coach that coached Mike Trout and then is now working with USA Baseball. And like, it's just cool to know that, I was part of a staff there at Drexel for some time that was really good and beneficial and helped me in my future career.
And then the turn of the century ushered in your first head coaching position. And boy,
Yeah.
did you take advantage of that one.
you know, so there's usually opportunities for head coaching positions for young guys like myself. At that time, I was 30 or about to be 30. Um, they're going to be rebuild type programs. They're not going to be programs that have been highly successful. They're not going to be, you know, top of the conference or nationally ranked programs generally. And, the head coach that had been at Westchester was a friend, and I would see him recruiting, and he was a good man, but, he always had good things to say to me and about me and whatnot. And I think he took a medical leave that last year, maybe Coach Hopkins did. And then they named like an interim. And then it became clear that that position was going to be opened up as soon as the season ended. So I kind of had my eyes on it. And because I felt like it would be a good first head coaching opportunity. Not that I was going in thinking I want to bounce or be set seven different places, nothing like that. But I was focused on eventually the hope of becoming a Division I head coach. Um, I felt I was ready to be a head coach. I had had some interviews and a few offers the year or two prior while I was still at Drexel. talking a lot with Coach Maines. I thought a couple of them were like not the right fit, not the best fit. So, I stayed and continued my time there. Um, when I interviewed for Westchester and ultimately, took the position, it was a pay cut. It was a significant pay cut to go from a full-time Division I assistant to that head coaching position at Westchester in 2000. But that's okay. Sometimes you take a step back to take that step or two forward at some point in your career. And you say I made the most of it. I was really lucky. I recruited some really fantastic kids. They're not kids anymore. Fantastic people. I had some great assistant coaches around me, administrators that were supportive. So there were a lot of things working with and for me as opposed to against me in that situation. We had a great facility. We had a good school. It wasn't super expensive. I could get kids in. So there were a lot of things and reasons why we were able to do what we were able to do in a relatively short time. I mean, my first year we took some lumps, and it's funny because that's 20. I got a Facebook message from somebody that played for me, and it's 25 years ago to that season. I got my first win, spring of 2001, and we all got together back in November, December of this past year. The guys that were on that first team, it has been 25 years. A few of them reached out to me, invited me, and I was like, at first, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll go, maybe I don't. I still stay in touch with a few of the guys, but I went, and I'm so glad I did. I had a great night with those guys, reminiscing, and it's so funny how things that you don't even remember clearly impact them individually. Steve Almer was the winning pitcher in my first college win as a head coach, and he's a 6'6" righty that threw, 89 to 92, a little bit of a curveball change, pretty good stuff at our level. And he had never been successful his first 3 years. Didn't have a whole lot of success. Shouldn't say never been successful. Didn't have a whole lot of success. And I saw him my first fall, and I was like, this kid's going to help us. This kid's all right. We're going to do some things, make him a little better here, keep him over the rubber a little longer, do some different things for the movement on the fastball, so on and so forth. And I remember making a friendly wager with one of our athletic administrators that he was going to win 5 or more games. And granted, this is a team that I think had won 22 games total the 3 years before I got there. So the administrator was like, oh my God, I'm taking your dinner here. Like, we're going to bet dinner or lunch or something. I'm like, all right, I got him 5 wins or more. And he ended up winning 6 games that year for us, which was pretty crazy, pretty cool. So I won the bet. But more importantly, our ride down to Virginia or North Carolina, wherever that first series was that year, I hadn't announced the starting pitcher it was going to be the next day. And I brought Steve up to where I was sitting on the bus, and I sat down and said, Steve, man, I believe in you. I have so much confidence in you and what you're going to be able to do for us. You're getting the start tomorrow, opening day, game 1. And he lit up. He just lit up. He was like, Coach, I appreciate it. I'm ready. I'm excited. Went out through really well, got the win. And then at the get together this past fall, he came up and told me that story of how like no one had showed confidence in him before until me. And like, just to me, that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Let's talk about what college recruitment looked like in the early 2000s. Well, I guess what were the factors that you were looking for in potential roster spots on your teams?
Awesome. So great question. We were going to have a lot of turnover with our roster. We had a lot of seniors that we felt, we're going to be finished eligibility. And then there wasn't a whole lot in the younger classes. We did inherit a few players that went on to have great careers. So that needs to be said. But I was pretty much looking for guys that would run through a wall for me, run through a wall for the program, and wanted to win above everything else. Guys that have won, they were successful. So I talked to my assistant coach. I said, we're going to go and attack the successful high school programs within Chester County, Berks County, Montgomery County, Bucks County, all the different counties around Philadelphia County. And then even into New Jersey, kids that had played for Brooklawn Legion and these Legion programs that won the Legion World Series. Like, I want winners. Okay. It doesn't mean I'm not going to take a kid that played on a not great team, but had tools and projected. But I knew I needed to bring in kids that would expect and put the work in to win at the college level. My first recruiting class, you know, so we were 22 and 27 or something like that, my first year maybe with the group that, here it is, here's your team. And my first recruiting class had, I want to say, two or three Westchester Hall of Famers in it. And they were kids that, and one's the current head coach, Mike LaRosa. And that kid turned down good Division I offers to come play at Westchester for me and be part of what we were going to do. And they came on not a promise, but a platform that I was recruiting on. We hadn't won. We hadn't won yet, but they bought in. They bought into my vision. They bought into, I felt like we knew how to turn a program around and be successful. And we would do that. And it was super, exciting to get commitments from players like Mike and Jeff Brennan, who's one of the other. I mean, he's in the all-time record books at Westchester. He's in the Hall of Fame there. And the next year, the recruiting class included Frank Gailey, who went in the Hall of Fame, and Matt Catalese, who went in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's really lucky. And, we hit on some kids that were everything and above what we thought they could be at the college level. And they, like I said, many of them turned down good Division I offers and opportunities to come to Westchester because maybe we offered a chance to play or pitch sooner. We offered some things that maybe they weren't going to be able to get had they gone to school X, Y, or Z at Division I level. So recruiting was challenging at historically a program that had been down and an underachieving program. But if I got in the house and I was big on home visits and doing it the right way, and I saw some of my daughter's recruiting firsthand, and some coaches did it the way I approached it, and they called her consistently. Some reached out the first night you can reach out, and then my daughter never heard from them again. And it just baffles me that some people recruit that way. And it's so important to build relationships in the recruiting process. And you want that kid to be part of your program. I feel like the kid, the family, you need to really get to know each other to protect myself and to protect our program. We want to make sure we're bringing in great fits and great people, great makeup, great mentalities. I mean, that all goes into the equation as well. So, I remember some home visits I did that turned me off on kids. Mostly that was about just you get in the room and you start asking questions. And I'm big into like, hey, tell me about a time where you struggled. Tell me about a time where, it wasn't easy for you. Maybe you got hit around on the mound, and tell me what was going on through your mind or through your head. Man, I said that in one home visit, and 10 seconds before, after out of the dad's mouth was, yeah, he had a new catcher catching him, and the kid was like, yeah, I didn't get a chance to warm up properly. It was like excuses. It was all excuses, coming at me from every direction. I'm like, man, something's up. And sure enough, it was just somebody that there was no accountability. Like I just want the kid to say, I stunk that day. I left a couple fastballs in the middle of the plate and they got blistered. It happens. And it's how you recover from those things that make you or don't, right? In my opinion. So I think of things like that, and that's the landscape of recruiting back then. I'm sure it's similar in a lot of ways. Now, I think obviously technology has really helped recruiting process, coaches and athletes, video, X, Twitter, whatever, Instagram, all those different things that we didn't really have a ton of back then. But we did it the old-fashioned way, man. We went out and saw people play. I would go see kids play other sports. If a kid was a basketball, baseball kid, I wanted to go see him play basketball in the winter. See what that was like. If he was a football quarterback, I wanted to see how he led. You got to find out so much about kids.
How do you see talent evals differing between recruiting for college and potentially getting a roster spot on an MILB team?
How do I see? Say it again. Sorry.
How do you see talent evaluation differ? Essentially, what are you looking for differently in that high school going into college versus that college going pro?
Yeah. So great question. I think the biggest thing is we are much more forgiving bringing a kid onto a college program about some flaws or blemishes, or if there isn't, if he hasn't fully physically developed and things like that yet. Whereas on the pro side, we're still going to take those super projectable young high school talents or Dominican players and things like that. But when you're talking about a college guy for the draft, you're definitely going to be looking for more polish than they had coming out of high school and because they're further along. They're 3 years older if they're college juniors, or 4 years older, or even some of these guys that played 5 years in college, right? Like you're much closer to your end physical projection. So, are the tools, are the skills, the framework of them at least present to survive a ball, for a college type player? I mean, I don't see a whole lot of value in just taking a college guy if he's going to never get out of complex league, right? We want a guy that's going to be able to go through A and high A, double A, and maybe further, hopefully get to the big leagues. But yeah, I think that's the biggest difference is, you know, when you're recruiting in college, you're going to be much more accepting of the flaws and lack of, fundamentals you can teach. I mean, believe me, we still do a lot. Our player development people do a great job of taking players and improving their pitch mix or their bat speed or different areas that they need help and develop. And player development departments all across all 30 clubs do really well with these things. Um, and they need to because very few guys are a finished product and ready when they come into pro ball, right? Like, yes, there are the rare special cases of guys that are ready to play like with minimal minor league time, but a lot of players still need to develop. So
Talking about that track, how do you ever feel confident in a high school player to take him in the MLB draft?
I think you have to feel as if there's obviously a high end premium elite, if you will, set of tools and skills that you already see. And then on top of it, there's room for projection on top of those attributes that you've identified that you like and that you think will play. I mean, what's going to carry him to a successful big league career as a hitter? Is he going to hit for power and why and all those things? I think it's a hard line to say, does he need college before he comes to pro ball, or is he ready for the pro environment, with that high school kid? And college baseball has done a great job the last several years, and it's getting better and better. And as we've condensed the draft and we lost the short season level in leagues, it's put more onus on college baseball to develop and make players ready for professional careers, which has been, I'd say solid so far. So I think it's a good thing. It's made college baseball maybe better. That more kids that maybe in the past would have signed and maybe fizzled out in high A or double A, maybe they're going the college route and maturing, developing, getting three-fourths of the way maybe to a degree before they come out. So I think it's been a good change the way the dynamic has shifted a little bit the last 5 years or so.
So you will see time left at the top of your screen. That once that time elapses in about 2.5 minutes, we do get kicked out of the Zoom meeting. The same link that got you into this one will get you into the next one. I do have a couple more questions, so I do
Of
anticipate
course.
that time running out.
Okay.
And that time will start over once we get back into the interview.
Okay.
But
So we almost,
for
you
the
almost,
remaining 2 minutes, I do have one more question. How do you, speaking of the restructuring of the minor league system, how did that impact college development versus professional development?
so more specifically, what do you want? Yeah, let's
Um,
let's reframe the
yeah,
question a
yeah.
little bit if you don't mind. So, okay, how has development changed as a college coach now that there's fewer minor league teams?
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of a coach, what more do you have to do at the college level to prepare them for that jump to the pros?
I don't think it's anything different or a major
Okay.
change from what you know, outside looking in. I haven't been a college coach in 19 years,
Yeah.
but I talk to guys regularly. I mean, I think one great thing that has happened with the influx and use of technology across pro baseball is it's gone across colleges as well, especially at Division I level where, my buddy's the pitching coach at Columbia, Tom Carty. He was one of my pitching coaches while I was at Georgia College. And they, do a velo program in the fall and winter, and there was some data on that. And people are using data and using spin rates and movement profiles and seam shifting and everything else that we're using at the pro level to develop players. So I think it's probably been enhanced with technology, development of players at the college level, I would say.
I do really like the specificity of your comments on data for development. How, over the course of your coaching and scouting career, have you used data differently to evaluate?
Well, it's funny. It's We didn't have the fancy Rapsodo hit track stuff when I was coaching at Westchester or Georgia College or Drexel prior to that. We used the radar gun and ropes in the cage for, launch angle and exit speed and things like that. But we were cognizant of it and we wanted to coach and teach to improve those things that we felt were important, which, I mean, hitting the ball harder is going to be make you better. Like that's, how can we do that? Can we improve bat speed? We knew ways that we could improve bat speed. We knew ways that we could develop velocity. Um, was it different than maybe the weighted balls and some of the different driveline things that driveline other people do today? Sure, it was different, but there's plenty of kids over the course of my college coaching that we added a few miles an hour to in their peak velocity. We added a few miles an hour to on their average velocity. They were able to hold velocity, which meant to me like we were improving arm endurance, longer in their outings, which is very important. Their stuff held. So it's not that we're smarter today. We might have more access to cooler technology and toys and things that are flashy and video game like hit tracks and the my daughter sends me the video of like hit tracks in her cages and it's cool and I love it. But you know, we were teaching and coaching that way 25 years ago. Like, it's not new in that respect. But I think kids learn differently maybe now than they did then. And it's an iPad generation and video game generation and all those different things that, go into showing them different things, and that's what I mean by like, the data and hey, this is where, your extension was coming into this season. We worked on improving your extension. Now, we're showing you through Rapsodo, you're getting an extra 6 inches of extension, which is allowing your fastball, it might be 91, but the hitter feels it at 93, and, again, it takes, I've had to learn a lot. I've had to adapt over the last 5 years. The data, the spin, just all the different, some of the different nuances of what's important to, my particular organization, or when I was with Cleveland, what was important there. Um, it's made me a better scout. And if I ever coached again, it would make me a better coach because, just the wealth of information that I've been able to, learn and experience and actually have hands-on work with, it's been very valuable to me learning and growing as a baseball person. I, really respect. There's a scout I respect a great deal, Sean Pender, who's been around a long time. And years ago, when I first maybe got into scouting, there was things starting to change about evaluation. He used to always say, it's adapt or die. Adapt or die. Whatever field you're in, technology, you got to embrace it. And there are some teams that may have gone too far on one side, too heavy in data, and they're pulling back a little bit to get a little closer to the middle. There are some teams that were way, way, way oversaturated in the human, the scout side and wanted and needed to build out their analytics and data, and they've done it. I think the best are somewhere where there's good balance, right? And decisions are ultimately made through um, where there's input from everywhere, not just one-sided input.
So what happened between your GCSU coaching and the Red Sox organization finding you?
So really, first of all, I wish the year before, so 2006, which was only my second year at Georgia College, but it was a great year. We were 53-12 that year. We won the first conference championship for the program there. We played 65 games. We never lost back-to-back games the entire, from February 2nd against Tampa through the regionals, which I still, and I was only a head coach for 7 years, but that's one of the things I'm most proud of is I had that team that was so resilient, and we were number one in the country for 11 weeks and managed to never lose consecutive games. Is like, for me, really, really, I think about it and they talk about it, the guys on that team. It's like a little bit, it's not shocking, but we played really good competition, Division I games, the whole deal. But um, I'd say, okay, so what happened after my second year? So, ex-wife, Ava's mom, we were married in Georgia, and she did not really care for it in Georgia. We were trying to get back home. Didn't really like it very much. And we were trying to get back home being the Mid-Atlantic. Her folks had retired to a beach area in Delaware. So, we were trying to get back up that way, north. I was starting to get some really good Division I interviews, a couple mid majors, an offer, one that really did not even get us anywhere closer to home. So it really didn't make a whole lot of sense to pursue that. Um, and I started to put some feelers out through scouts that, hey, I'd be interested in maybe a area scout job that gets me back up to the Mid Atlantic. We had some guys that went. I had a second rounder and a third rounder, and some guys that went pretty high in the draft while I was at Georgia College. And so I got to meet a lot of scouts, a lot of cross checkers, a lot of very influential people on the pro side. And I want to say I did a phone interview with the Red Sox in 2006, and they ended up hiring a great baseball guy, Tony Guzzo, who was a longtime coach in Old Dominion and some other places. And they hired Guz um, that year, and he did the Mid Atlantic. I didn't get an in-person interview, which I felt like if I had gotten in front of them, they would have felt maybe more, more comfortable because I didn't know anybody there. There was no connection. It was just through my work. They knew who I was, head coach doing good things in Georgia. Um, Fast forward a year later, it's right after the draft, 2007-ish, and the scouting director at the time, Jason McLeod, calls me. He's like, "Hey, are you still interested in being a scout?" I'm like, "Sure." Yeah, he's like, "Well, we want to bring you up to Fenway, interview you. We're going to open up the Mid Atlantic again." But the funny thing of the whole thing is, you know, Guz was there in 2007 for the draft and everything, and 2007 was a World Series year for the Red Sox, so they got that ring. And I got there after the draft, so I didn't get a ring in '07 because, I was hired after. You got to be on staff kind of before the draft is the way they do that. So anyhow, cutting back to how that all worked out, I think the Diamondbacks also interviewed me and the Red Sox interviewed me. Um, Red Sox offered me that job, and it was an opportunity for us to move back to we moved close to uh, her family in Delaware, and Ava, my daughter, was just a year, maybe a year and a half at that time. So she had been born in Georgia, but we were moving back up there, and I knew I was going to be on the road a lot as a scout, so it felt really good to have you know her family nearby, and mine was not far as well. My dad was down in the Delaware area, and my mom, brother, they were in the Philly area, not too far up the road. So although it was tough, and I hated walking away from coaching at that time, it was the best move family wise. I felt, and that was what led to it. Did I think I'd be back coaching probably within 5 years? Sure, I kind of did. But as things developed and evolved, I was offered one Division I head coaching job in the Philadelphia area that, I mean, sadly, the commitment to the program in terms of pay and in terms of assistant coach and scholarship dollars was not really attractive. Um, and there's just only so many jobs you can look at when you're in a certain area. And um, here I am 19 years later, still scouting and loving it. But yeah, that's kind of what led from Georgia College to the Red Sox opportunity.
I know I was gonna ask you if you had gotten a ring in 2007 because I didn't know whether you had gotten there with enough time
Right.
to the
No,
program.
no, it was that's the way, that's the kind of I don't want to say the policy or however it works. And I get it. The draft's the kind of like the mark, if you're there prior to the draft, or there for the scouting season, so to speak, but I came on. I actually didn't officially start because, again, I took another pay cut to become a scout. So, I had, each place, Westchester, Georgia College and State, they were great to me as we were doing better, winning and building successful programs. The leadership at those places were taking care of me and helping me get more, you know, pay and, assistant coach salaries and scholarship dollars and different things that help. So, but again, to make the jump and get us back towards the Mid Atlantic, I took a pay cut initially, and then again start establishing yourself, doing good things. Then all of a sudden, they start rewarding you, and then you know, in 20, gosh, maybe 2014, the Astros called for permission to interview me for a job, and then in you know 2017, it was the Cubs and the Indians or Guardians, called, and so things like that happen and get you to where you get to. So.
So I'm hearing a few post World Series call-ups potentially. What did that say to you about kind of the restructuring internally of that time post World Series win and post World Series loss?
So, what are you talking about? Like in 2014, after we won in 13, or what?
Yeah, so like in 2013 after you won and then you were just talking about the Cubs in 16 and then
So
the
that was actually the Cubs and Indians. Well, I'll do the first one first. So,
yeah,
and I don't remember
trying to put the timeline
time
together.
frame. So time frame is I had been a scout with Boston '07. '08 was my first draft. So that year, '08 was my first draft, and then I felt like we were going to win the World Series in 2008. Honestly, I thought we had the best team in baseball, and unfortunately, we had a situation where Manny Ramirez was a great right-hand hitter, needed to be moved, and Jason Bay, who filled in, did a great job. But we ended up losing Game 7 to the Rays in the ALCS in 2008. We had, and granted, I say this, the Phillies were my childhood team. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm a Philly guy, Phillies, Flyers, Sixers, Eagles. But we had smoked the Phillies in the interleague play in 2008. And I was like, all right, we win this game seven. We're going to go in and steamroll the Phillies, and I am going to get a ring in 2008. Well, David Price came in as a rookie in 2008. I think he got the last 9 outs against us, and the Rays beat us in the ALCS game seven. And then the Phillies ended up beating them in the World Series that year. But that was 2008. So yeah, I thought it had a chance to be a World Series year that year too. Anyway, 2013. I mean, that was the marathon tragedy year. What an amazing group, and awesome run to and through the World Series. Great moments. My first experience of being part of like the World Series gala, the big event they have at the home ballparks, and being there with all my buddies, the scouting buddies and player development guys, and just enjoying, being in the bleachers for games one and two. Incredible experience I'll never forget, and I'm super appreciative of the way we were treated, by the Red Sox at that time, in those years. And I think it was 2014. A good friend had become you know, higher up with the Astros, and that kind of led to him trying to get me over to there. The way it worked it was winter of 2017. So it was like December 2017 and it was crazy because, you know, you don't know this happens, but at the same week, the Cleveland Guardians, well, they were Indians then, but Cleveland Guardians and the Chicago Cubs both reached out to the Red Sox for permission to interview me for positions. And now, granted, I had been with the Red Sox since '07, so now we're looking at like 10 years in or so. Um, Same way of not necessarily doing things, but like, I was ready for an opportunity to learn, grow, maybe different role, um, hearing new vision, new voice, new philosophies. So I wanted to look closely at those opportunities. And a lot of the guys I had worked for in Boston were now in Chicago. Jason McLeod had gone over there. Theo was over there. Jed Hoyer. There were a lot of connections to the Cubs, and they were familiar with my work and familiar with me, the person. So there was obviously certainly some comfort there in looking at that opportunity. As it turned out, and I didn't know anybody in Cleveland. They had, asked around, and someone gave my name as a person that would be a good fit for the role they were trying to fill. And so they reached out, and I was in a I was in a great spot. Like honestly, I feel like I could have taken a job with the Cubs and felt terrific. I could have taken the jobs with the Indians, which is what I ended up doing ultimately and felt terrific. Or I could have stayed because the Red Sox did offer some really good things, expose me to different areas. They were going to increase my salary, do different things to help keep me, which meant a lot to me at that time, um, that they were willing to do that. And I sat back, and one of the big reasons I went to the position with Cleveland was because it was going to be one. It was back in the pension, the non-uniform, the NUP, the non-uniform pension plan. So that was an opportunity to get back into NUP. We had that for some time in Boston, and then we got rid of that to go into the enhanced 401k, which has been great. But the pension was pretty attractive to go over to Cleveland. I liked the idea, and when I got under the hood a little bit of during the interview process of Cleveland and how important I felt scouting was, and smaller market club that was going to rely heavily in terms of in acquisitions in all markets, and they talked about my background and exposing me to different markets, international, amateur, pro. Um, a lot of that was exciting to me, and so I took the position with Cleveland, and then the Red Sox won in 2018. so I didn't get that ring either. So, but no, it was a great experience for the 3+ years I was with Cleveland, and then the door opened up to come back to Boston. And I always every opportunity I've been in or every job I've had, I've always wanted to and tried to leave on good terms. I would never ever feel slighted by, Drexel or Westchester or Georgia College or the Red Sox or Cleveland. It's, try to not burn any bridges ever. And, there was an opportunity to come back, and I'm excited to be back. And I've been back now, I guess, 5 years or so, and 5 or more years. So it's exciting, and I feel like we have a super bright future with our, the roster we have currently and our farm system and our direction and our leadership. Yeah, I'm excited.
So, were any of the guys that you scouted for the Sox on that World Series roster?
2013 or 2018? No, I don't even think so. I think no, as an amateur scout, so the process, it's, you know, you do your area, you do your area. You might go outside of your area and see players and do reports on Andrew Benintendi, who was at Arkansas. But so he was on the roster in 2018, but that wasn't my, I didn't sign him or anything like that. So it's a lot of times it's collaborative. In 11 years of doing a draft from 2008 to I guess 2017, or I don't know how many years that would have been, but however many drafts I was in, I had one player that I drafted made the big leagues. And not that I drafted, but the Red Sox took that was recommended by me. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't have, Jed Jerko, a really talented big leaguer at the top of my list from West Virginia that year, but we didn't take him for our reasons, and we took somebody else that became a big leaguer or whatever. So it's just going in when you are an area scout, and there were years where I didn't get anybody in the draft, and I worked my tail off and do all my makeup and my visits and everything. And, you look up, and that was when the draft was 40 rounds sometimes. And you're like, man, I didn't get one out of 40, but that happens. That's okay. Um, and then there's some years maybe you might get four guys. But it just didn't shake out where I had a whole lot of guys that made an impact or got to the big leagues. We were aggressive with high school players in my area that had a lot of upside, and we took and paid this. These were in the days where you could kind of there wasn't slotting, so you were able to like give a third rounder, $1 million if you wanted. Um, and we did that with some high school guys my first few drafts, and we were aggressive. And those guys had value, and they were asked about in trades, and they moved really well through our system. And unfortunately, a few of them just kind of teetered out in that AAA, didn't make that next jump. But again, they had value, and that's kind of what you start to realize that the draft. Yes, you hope that you get guys that can impact the Boston Red Sox at the major league level and play in the big leagues and help us win the pennant or win the World Series. But really, at the end of the day, if your draft yields a good amount or some guys that have value, and maybe you use them to acquire major leaguers at some point or different pieces, that's what it's all about, is trying to bring value into your organization, depth, and areas where you might be light or whatnot. So yeah, nobody was on that. Nobody was on those active rosters that were like signed by Chris Calciano or anything like that.
So, when you look at a high school player who could back in the day potentially go for $1 million versus a 5-year NCAA D1 guy. How do you see those two trajectories differently, basically from the jump?
Well, again, I think the first thing is there's always a greater comfort level with the guy who's done it and performed at a higher level, whether it be, especially one of the premium conferences in college baseball, um, than, a high school guy who, even though he may have played on the circuit, so to speak, and some high level travel, and it's still not the same as like performing for 3 years in the ACC or SEC or Big 12. So I think there's always that greater comfort level for most people. I think there's a safer floor, if that makes sense, on a lot of those guys. And I can remember a lot of great, not arguments, but conversations in draft meeting rooms about, okay, well, this scout wants to shoot for this super high upside high school kid that if it all clicks, he becomes, you know, a star. And there's some that are on the side of like, well, wait a minute, we got this, you know, college right-hander that the floor is probably a fifth starter for him in the big leagues. Like that's a pretty safe bet, and that's a pretty important piece. We know how much starting pitching costs on the open market. Like, so I think you get it, you get under the hood of some of those conversations, and you get to see where people line up. And I think there's balance. I think a lot of it depends on where your system is at a given time, where you're not so much. I mean, you don't look at your major league team if you're in the win cycle or the rebuild cycle necessarily, but more of a system. And if the system is like really light on upper level quality arms, maybe you're going to look at that college righty that's closer to ready a lot harder than that high school shortstop that, might be 4 or 5 years from impacting, or helping. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of very basic fundamental explanation of those things, I'd say. I mean, common.
I mean, I'm a lifelong Pittsburgh sports fan. I was raised in West Virginia in Morgantown. I went to West Virginia University, and I've just been consistently let down by the Pirates organization, specifically from a longevity perspective. I mean, a few years ago, they drafted a high schooler with the first pick of the draft. What would they have had to see in that guy to take him number one?
Are we talking about Connor Griffin? Was he number one or no?
No.
Oh, all
This
right.
this
Well,
was
delete
this
that
was
out.
prior to Connor.
Delete that out. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, to take a guy 1-1 high school, you've got to feel as if he's checking all the boxes of, impact, upside, makeup. There's projection. There's also present tools and skills that put him easily, towards the top, if not at the top of your prospect board. Um, yeah, I mean, like it's just got to be a wow factor. It's got to be a wow type guy to consider high school typically 1-1. But I mean, you've seen it done often. It's not. I don't think it's you know. I don't think it's like rare, really. Honestly, if that's what's best. So.
Yeah, I'm always just kind of interested from a player development perspective, what the allure of high school is to an MLB scout.
Well, I think the allure, the player development people love getting their hands on the 17, 18-year-old kid as opposed to the 21, because a lot of times think about the 3 years of like whether it's been his coach in college that's, taught mechanics a certain way or approach or whatever it is. So like you're spending time, not always, but sometimes player development has to spend time in like correcting years of doing things a certain way to get the most out of, because let's face it, college coaches, winning is an important part of the job. Okay. Yes, player development, and they preach it and they have to, because they have to show that we're going to help you get better. We're going to make you a better player. We're going to make you stronger. And that's a huge part of it all too. But at the end of the day, they get extended or, contracts renewed oftentimes because they're being successful, winning conference championships, or, at least being in the mix for those. So winning winning is not necessarily the priority when you get into professional baseball, especially at the lower levels, right? Where it's about getting you your innings, getting you your at bats, getting your time in the field, figuring out how to how to be a professional, how to handle the day to day routine, and you know, um, teaching them those things. So I think I think if you ever ask PD people or farm directors or field coordinators and things like, what the big attraction is to high school, it's just you're getting them much sooner in the process before the curve of the physical, maturity is all kind of maxed out. Although kids, I mean, I keep saying it, like the more I see high school players, but just watching an all-star game or whatever it might be, or popping something, they're so much more physical than they were, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that it's I'd say it's a good thing, but sometimes there's less projection in those guys now than there ever was. Some of them still there's huge amounts of physical projection left. So
Let's talk about emotional projection. How do you, I guess, what role does mental health play in scouting?
yeah, I think we always try to the best we can assess makeup in terms of aptitude, attitude, decision making, what motivates. Um, who are some mentors that this young person has kind of been exposed to and been around. Um, what type, what type of coachability or accountability, those type of traits that you learn through not just watching the player play, but getting to know them either through, you know, making visits with them, spending time with them at sometimes in colleges we used to get like a little bit of time with them in the office to either give testing or ask the questions. But it's an important role in the process. You have to one, I don't want the kid that the goal is to be drafted, right? Like I want to find out that his goal is to not only make it to the big leagues, but to be a long term big leaguer. Like I want to try to find guys that when I was an area scout, like want to play in the big leagues for a long time. You know, if you stumble upon someone that you realize that their goal is to be drafted, a lot of times when they get into the pro environment, it gets too tough for them. They've achieved their big goal. Their dream was to get drafted, or to put on a uniform and say I'm in the Red Sox system. That wasn't what it was about for me. It was trying to find guys that were going to use Pete Rose's term, run through hell in a gasoline suit to get to the big leagues. Do anything it took. To find a way to scratch and claw, to play multiple positions if asked, to do little things. And yeah, I mean that's not always easy to uncover, but you get clues. You watch. We would go watch practice. I would go watch practice for a high school kid and see his interaction with his teammates. Does he? And I wouldn't even. Sometimes I'd be out in the outfield where nobody knew I was there. But just watch. And is this a kid that is well respected by his teammates, or is he carry himself in a way that puts off these guys, or is like, carries himself like he's better than everybody else, and things that don't really pan out typically too well. There's always exceptions, but um, you know, you I want to see the guy that makes a great play and seven guys are in a dugout or out there on the top step greeting him coming off, not no one. Because if there's no one, I'm saying there's a reason there's no one there. You know,
From a pitcher's perspective, what are you looking for in game to monitor kind of ease of that wavelength?
yeah, that's great. Composure. I'm monitoring how he handles. Maybe there's two outs, nobody on in a close game, and the shortstop kicks a routine ground ball. You know, is he frazzled? Does he go ball one, ball two, ball three to the next hitter? Does he, show bad body language after that happens? Just looking at things a little closer when stuff goes awry, if that makes sense. Like, it's everybody is composed and confident, and strong when it's smooth sailing. Okay. What's he like when stuff starts to happen in the wrong direction? I was ready to say a word that I can't say happens, but you know what I mean? So,
When you're watching these guys and evaluating their play in game, is there something that would immediately turn you off from having him in a major league uniform?
I mean, we can't run away from it. I don't like amateur players. If I'm watching an amateur player, this is a different scenario. If I'm watching an amateur player, the player that shuts it down halfway down the line on a routine ground ball, just laziness, lack of hustle, not even hustle, but just lack of playing the game the right way would turn me off. Would it completely X a guy off my list? No, because if there's insane ability, you have to hope that there's people within your organization that can get him to improve on some of those things that you don't like, right? They're correctable. Maybe nobody's ever told them, look, or maybe nobody's ever punished them. We're going to take you out of the game if you don't run the ball out. You're in college or you're in high school. Um, so things like that on the amateur side would be, you know, cause me to hesitate sometimes on some guys. In the professional environment, um, there's not a whole lot. I mean, on-field makeup, again, I want to see players that care. I want to see players that want to win and show, and you can see that. I want to see players that, when I go there early on a Tuesday, first day of the series, Tuesday through Sunday, and they're getting some defensive work, that are doing it business-like. They're not just out there going through the motions. That they're trying to get better. And it could be August and 100 degrees, and I get it, and that's hard. But you know what? It's hard. It's hard to survive in the big leagues too. And you have to do some things sometimes when you're in A ball, double A, whatever it is, to grind through it. The PD people will tell you that separates and gets guys to be. They got to be able to embrace the grind and manage that and get through it. So everybody has ability, right? Everybody's talented. There's tons of tools. There's guys that throw 100 in A ball. They don't yet quite know where it's going consistently, but it's in there. And there's guys that can hit balls 115 miles an hour in A ball. It's just they do it once a week and not 6 times a week. And so ability's there. It's what's going to separate.
What do you see as the biggest separator to propel you up through the minors? Because so many guys seem to plateau in
It's
double A or
hard.
triple A.
It's hard. I think that the biggest physical separator would be consistent quality for a position player, like consistent quality bat to ball skills, contact rates, things like that are generally going to continue to play through the upper levels and hopefully translate. Um, Getting away from the physical side of a position player, being able to mentally navigate and survive those tough times, right? And like not let them spiral into longer funks. And when you struggle in a given game, to come back tomorrow, and have a short memory, forget about it. Learn from it, but forget about it. Um, I always talk about, that, cornerbacks in the NFL, right? They get burned a lot. You're going to get beat. If you get beat in the first quarter for a 75-yard touchdown on a bomb, like if you're thinking about that the next series, that's not good. Like you're destined to get burned again. Like you've got a short memory, forget it. Know that you're there for a reason, you know, as a hitter, as an infielder, know that you're there for a reason. You have the ability to thrive and succeed and help the team win. 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts or 4 for 4 with 4 rockets. You come to the next day preparing the same way, ready to play. And that's, I'd say, again, not quantifiable necessarily, but guys that have that approach and that mindset seem to impress me and last longer and maybe sustain those bumps at the upper levels better.
Yeah. Let me see when this episode is coming out. I think it's pretty soon. Is there anything that you think that I missed about putting your story into context?
No, and I don't think I said anything that was like, I just didn't want, I don't want to say anything like, not proprietary, but like what the
Right.
Red Sox would be like,
I also
probably
was not going to ask you for any trade secrets, you know?
yeah, no, I think it's good. I think, I think that maybe, I don't know if I hit on the mental skill that those things
No,
enough,
no, you did.
but,
Yeah.
in different various spots along the way.
Your episode will be coming out on the 24th of this month. So
Cool.
you have a few weeks. I I love interviewing really anyone who works in baseball because there are so many, I'm going to call them fail safes to success. There are so many people that are trying to help these at times 17, 18-year-olds, at most 24, 25 recent college graduates. I say 25 now because now they're
Sure.
staying 5 years in college, succeed. And I think that from a scouting perspective, I'm sure that that's really cool to see the way that baseball has changed and kind of embraced development.
I mean, just it's been it's been a great run. I hope I have another 5 to 10 more years, maybe, or whatever I do, but and hopefully another World Series ring. Um, I
I want
think
that for
that,
you.
pardon me,
I said I want that for you.
thanks. But yeah, I mean, it's the game goes in cycles. The game, we're in a little bit of a maybe a downturn with the pure scouting and like in-person evaluations have kind of lessened a little bit over the last few years with the advances in video. And I get it. Like I'm able to sit here and I can watch a player and I can watch, if it's a left-handed hitter, I can watch his last 20 at bats versus left-handed pitchers in 20 minutes on my computer. Whereas, maybe I'm out of the ballpark for 6 nights and he faces a lefty twice, in that time frame. Like there's huge advantages to the way the scouting world has changed and data and video. Um, I mean, selfishly, it's allowed me to see so much more of my daughter playing. Like I've been able to see so many of her games in college this year and last few years of high school, and she's making adjustments. She's playing, she's DHing a lot. They have a senior at second. She's a middle infielder,
Yeah.
and they have a senior at second base and a really good sophomore shortstop. So she hasn't been on the field a ton, but she's, DH probably I think the last 15 games or so, or 17 games, something like that. I'm proud of her. She keeps working hard.
Yeah.
So
I am
that's
done with my
cool.
questions, but
Yeah,
I that you talking about the transfer portal did make me want to add just one more question.
yeah.
How does the transfer portal change the way that you scout?
I don't see it really as a. I mean, it's so common now, sadly, in a way. Like mid majors, to some extent, have become propellers or feeders to the big boys at the college level is what it looks like, and even some of the top non-Division One players are jumping level to Division One programs. So from a scouting perspective, it actually probably makes the evaluation picture better because you're seeing them at the highest level of amateur, baseball, whether at the Division One level, where before maybe, or maybe they're going from say the Ivy League. Well, it wouldn't go from the Ivy League. Maybe they're going from the Atlantic 10 or something to, the ACC. And just in terms of pure 20,000 foot view, I'd much rather evaluate that player in that conference than the other conference. Not that there's anything wrong with the other conference. There's great players, great coaches, everything. But um, I don't look at it as a negative. Now, maybe I'm missing an angle. You want to ask the why, make sure the why was just to play better baseball and there wasn't like a problem with why he left school X, Y, or Z or like got in trouble or, you know, make sure of those things, make sure everything checks out. But um, yeah, I don't look at it. I don't think you scout the player any differently because he was in the transfer portal and uh, switch schools to if it makes sense. If you went from to a better opportunity or higher level, it's
I
all
mean, I guess
good.
it's kind of like going back to community college to bolster your numbers just to shoot back into D1, right?
Sure. Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Anything else that you think that I missed about telling your story? Anything that you'd like to add that you think would add context to the story? The floor is yours. My questions are over.
I don't know. I think that I hopefully I came across as someone that is and always has been passionate about baseball. I love what I do. I feel very lucky and fortunate. Um, doesn't mean I don't work really hard or work my tail off. My parents were hard workers and instilled that in me, and hopefully I've instilled that in my daughter. And um, that's kind of how I approach things, and that's the mindset I have. So that's it.
Thank you so much,
Oh,
Chris,
for
for
sure.
coming on this episode. Like I was
Yeah.
saying, this will be published at the end of this month. So if anything happens really amazingly between now and then, shoot me a LinkedIn DM and I'll add it to the script. Otherwise, good luck. Go win a World
Yeah.
Series.
And your Pirates are going to be okay. Ben Charrington's a good friend, and Steve Sanders there. They have some good people there that I think it's going to be a much better year than they have had the last few. And you
Please.
got for me, I mean, Connor, I love
Promise.
Connor Griffin. Obviously, how do you not love Connor Griffin?
Yeah.
And then Skeens, obviously, but
Yeah.
we'll see how that all plays out. But I
Man,
hope they.
Paul's a force.
He's insane, yeah.
He's ridiculous. Did you
So
see that McCutcheon just went to the Texans? Not the Texans.
Astros or Rangers?
Not the Astros.
Rangers.
Oh my gosh, yeah, the Rangers. I'm in football mode.
That's all right. So no, I
Ridiculous.
didn't see that.
Yeah,
I didn't.
that I sorry I'm breaking that news to you, but
That's all
yeah,
right. I don't have. So the way we do it now, I have, and this doesn't mean I don't follow any other baseball, but I have the I have the Mets, the Nationals, the Rays, and the Orioles as my four orgs that I'm like org expert. You
cool.
know, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm in every day. They're in the weeds with those orgs and talking to my
So
contacts.
so why those four?
Well, we have a few other guys that have four. Like so we split them up. They gave me those because of just um, I don't know. I don't know exactly the rationale as to why those ones, but um, oh, geographically a little bit. Like I can get to Baltimore stuff, Met stuff, Washington stuff pretty easy. Like commuters, I have some of the minor league complexes not far from me.
Yeah.
So I think they looked at that a little bit because I'm connected with guys in all organizations now at this point, 30 years in. But they call me for everything. They call me for a makeup. I'm doing a review that's due today. We have to turn in our review by the end of the day, and it's funny. I write my review, and a lot of my review is how often I'm called on for makeup information on players not in my organizations. But it's okay. I mean, that they just know that it could be a guy with the Cardinals, and he's been in the Cardinals organization for 5 years. Well, Calciano knows Patrick Anderson because Patrick Anderson, he's the AA manager for or AAA, or I don't AA or AAA now, but we coached against each other when he was at Hofstra and I was at Drexel in the mid 90s. And we've been friends for 25, 30 years. They know that because we do this whole Excel sheet of our contacts. And mine's probably like 150 contacts deep for all 30
Yeah.
orgs. It just is like Baseball Canada guys. Like we
Yeah.
we were looking at Matt Lloyd, who we took in the Rule 5 from the Cardinals in the minor league phase of the Rule 5, and they said, "Hey, can you reach out to Patrick Anderson? Patrick had Matt Lloyd in Double A." I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." And this is the night before the Rule 5 draft, so I reach out to Patrick. I call him. Crap, he didn't pick up, which is fine. He'll get back to me. But this is the night before, so I was starting to panic because it was now the morning of the Rule 5 draft and I hadn't heard back from Patrick. So I looked up the Lloyd guy, the player, and I saw that he played for Baseball Canada. And I am good buddies with Greg Hamilton, who's been like a big chief of Baseball Canada for 30 years. We met when he was an assistant coach at Maine and I was assistant coach at Drexel. And when Owen Casey, who's a prospect, well, he's in the big league, Cubs guy. I think he's still with the Cubs. Owen Casey was a Canadian kid, and 5 years ago, I remember scouting him when I was with Cleveland, and we talked. Greg and I talked at length. Well, I haven't talked to Greg in like 5 years, but I was like, okay, this Lloyd guy played on the junior national team and had some connections with Canada. So I called up Greg. I'm like, Greg, I need some makeup stuff on Lloyd. What do you got? And he's like, oh, and it was like we talked last week even though we hadn't talked in 5 years. And that's how baseball guys are usually, which is great. And he was going through and telling me all about, how, because he had a shoulder injury at the end of last year and, where he was in the rehab, which is something our people want to know. Like, okay, where is he in the rehab? And so I fed all that information to our people. And they're just like, that's not Patrick Anderson. I was like, no, I had to pivot. And they're like, that's awesome that you can pivot like that. And but that's what being around the game for a long time, it's nothing special. But I did, I was smart, and I would always go to the ballpark and introduce myself to people and talk to people, and not to be social, but to just start to build out a network of like contacts and people you can count on